the Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa. Translated into English prose from the original Sanskrit text by Pratap Chandra Roy C.I.E. This free ebook has been downloaded from holybooks.com. Vana Parva. Section 262, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, "These great warriors of the race of Bharata sojourned like immortals in the great forest of Kamyaka, employed in hunting and pleased with the sight of numerous wild tracts of country and wide reaches of woodland, gorgeous with flowers blossoming in season. And the sons of Pandu, each like unto Indra and the terror of his enemies, dwelt there for some time. And one day those valiant men, the conquerors of their foes, went about in all directions in search of game for feeding the Brahmanas in their company, leaving Draupadi alone at the hermitage, with the permission of the great ascetic Trinavindu, resplendent with ascetic grandeur, and of their spiritual guide Domya. Meanwhile, the famous king of Sindhu, the son of Dhritakshatra was, with a view to matrimony, proceeding to the kingdom of Salva, dressed in his best royal apparel and accompanied by numerous princes. And the prince halted in the woods of Kamyaka. And in that secluded place, he found the beautiful Draupadi, the beloved and celebrated wife of the Pandavas, standing at the threshold of the hermitage. And she looked grand in the superb beauty of her form, and seemed to shed a luster on the woodland around, like lightning illuminating masses of dark clouds. And they who saw her asked themselves, "Is this an Apsara, or a daughter of the gods, or a celestial phantom?" And with this thought, their hands also joined together. They stood gazing on the perfect and faultless beauty of her form. And Jayadratha, the king of Sindhu, and the son of Dhritakshatra, struck with amazement at the sight of that lady of faultless beauty, was seized with an evil intention. And inflamed with desire, he said to the prince named Kotika, "Whose is this lady of faultless form? Is she of the human kind? I have no need to marry if I can secure this exquisitely beautiful creature. Taking her with me, I shall go back to my abode, O sir, and inquire who she is and whence she has come and why also that delicate being hath come into this forest beset with thorns. Will this ornament of womankind, this slender-waisted lady of so much beauty, endued with handsome teeth and large eyes, accept me as her lord? I shall certainly regard myself successful, if I obtain the hand of this excellent lady. Go, Kotika, and inquire who her husband may be." Thus asked, Kotika, wearing a kundala, jumped out of his chariot and came near her, as a jackal approacheth a tigress, and spake unto her these words. Thus ends the 262nd section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 263, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Kotika said, "Excellent lady, who art thou that standest alone, leaning on a branch of the Kadamba tree at this hermitage and looking grand like a flame of fire blazing at night time, and fanned by the wind? Exquisitely beautiful as thou art, how is it that thou feelest not any fear in these forests? Methinks thou art a goddess, or a Yakshi, or a Denavi, or an excellent Apsara, or the wife of Aditya, or a daughter of the Naga king, or a Rakshasi, or the wife of Varuna, or of Yama, or of Soma, or of Kuvara, who, having assumed a human form, wanderest in these forests? Or, hast thou come from the mansions of the three, or of Vidatri, or of Savitri, or of Vibhu, or of Sakra? Thou dost not ask us who we are, nor do we know who protects thee here. Respectfully do we ask thee, good lady, who is thy powerful father, and, oh, do tell us truly the names of thy husband, thy relatives, and thy race, and tell us also what thou dost here. As for us, I am King Suratha's son whom people know by the name of Kotika, and that man with eyes large as the petals of the lotus, sitting on a chariot of gold, like the sacrificial fire on the altar, is the warrior known by the name of Ksemankara, king of Trigata. And behind him is the famous son of the king of Pulinda, who is even now gazing on thee. Armed with a mighty bow and endued with large eyes, and decorated with floral wreaths, he always liveth on the breasts of mountains. The dark and handsome young man, the scourge of his enemies, standing at the edge of that tank, is the son of Suvila of the race of Ikshvaku. And if, O excellent lady, thou hast ever heard the name of Jayadratha, the king of Soviras, even he is there at the head of 6,000 chariots, with horses and elephants and infantry, and followed by 12 Sovira princes as his standard bearers, named Angaraka, Kunjara, Guptaka, Satrunjaya, Shrinjaya, Suprabidha, Prabhankara, Bhramara, Ravi, Sura, Pratapa and Kuhana, all mounted on chariots drawn by chestnut horses, and every one of them looking like the fire on the sacrificial altar. The brothers also of the king, viz., the powerful Valahaka, Anika, Vidarana and others, are among his followers. These strong-limbed and noble youths are the flowers of the Sovira chivalry. The king is journeying in the company of these his friends, like Indra surrounded by the Maruths. O fine-haired lady, do tell us that are unacquainted with these matters, whose wife and whose daughter thou art. Thus ends the 263rd section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 264, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, the Princess Draupadi, thus questioned by that ornament of Sivi's race, moved her eyes gently, and letting go her hold of the Kadamba branch and arranging her silken apparel, she said, I am aware, Prince, that it is not proper for a person like me to address you thus, but as there is not another man or woman here to speak with thee, and as I am alone here just now, let me therefore speak. Know, worthy sir, that being alone in this forest here, I should not speak unto thee, remembering the usages of my sex. I have learned, Saivya, that thou art Suratha's son, whom people know by the name of Kotika. Therefore on my part, I shall now tell thee of my relations and renowned race. I am the daughter of King Drupada, and people know me by the name of Krishna, and I have accepted as my husbands 5 persons of whom you may have heard while they were living at Kahandavaprastha. Those noble persons, viz., Yudhishthira, Bhimasena, Arjuna, and the 2 sons of Madri, leaving me here and having assigned unto themselves the 4 points of the horizon, have gone out on a hunting excursion. The king hath gone to the east, Bhimasena towards the south, Arjuna to the west, and the twin brothers towards the north. Therefore, do ye now alight and dismiss your carriages so that ye may depart after receiving a due welcome from them. The high-souled son of Darua is fond of guests and will surely be delighted to see you. Having addressed Saivya's son in this way, the daughter of Drupada, with face beautiful as the moon, remembering well her husband's character for hospitality, entered her spacious cottage. Thus ends the 264th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 265, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, O Bharata, Kotikakya related to those princes who had been waiting, all that had passed between him and Krishna. And hearing Kotikakya's words, Jayadratha said to that scion of the race of Sivi, having listened only to her speech, my heart has been lovingly inclined towards that ornament of womankind. Why therefore hast thou returned thus unsuccessful? I tell thee truly, thou of mighty arms, that having once seen this lady, other women now seem to me like so many monkeys. I having looked at her, she has captivated my heart. Do tell me, Saivya, if that excellent lady is of the human kind. Kotika replied, this lady is the famous Princess Krishna, the daughter of Drupada, and the celebrated wife of the 5 sons of Pandu. She is the much esteemed and beloved and chaste wife of the sons of Pritha. Taking her with thee, do thou proceed towards Sovira. Vaisampayana continued, thus addressed, the evil-minded Jayadratha, the king of Sindhu, Sovira and other countries, said, I must see Draupadi. And with 6 other men he entered that solitary hermitage, like a wolf entering the den of a lion. And he said unto Krishna, Hail to thee, excellent lady! Are thy husbands well, and those, besides, whose prosperity thou always wishest? Draupadi replied, Kunti's son King Yudhishthira of the race of Kuru, his brothers, myself, and all those of whom thou hast enquired of, are well. Is everything right with thy kingdom, thy government, exchequer, and thy army? Art thou, as sole ruler, governing with justice the rich countries of Scythia, Sivi, Sindhu and others that thou hast brought under thy sway? Do thou, O prince, accept this water for washing thy feet. Do thou also take this seat. I offer thee 50 animals for thy train's breakfast. Besides these, Yudhishthira himself, the son of Kunti, will give thee porcine deer and Nanku deer, and does, and antelopes, and sarabas, and rabbits, and ruru deer, and bears, and samvara deer and gayals and many other animals, besides wild boars and buffaloes and other animals of the quadruped tribe. Hearing this, Jayadratha replied, saying, All is well with me. By offering to provide our breakfast, thou hast in a manner actually done it. Come now and ride my chariot and be completely happy. For it becomes not thee to have any regard for the miserable sons of Pritha who are living in the woods, whose energies have been paralyzed, whose kingdom hath been snatched and whose fortunes are at the lowest ebb. A woman of sense like thee doth not attach herself to a husband that is poor. She should follow her lord when he is in prosperity but abandon him when in adversity. The sons of Pandu have forever fallen away from their high state, and have lost their kingdom for all time to come. Thou hast no need therefore, to partake of their misery from any regard for them. Therefore, O thou of beautiful hips, forsaking the sons of Pandu, be happy by becoming my wife, and share thou with me the kingdoms of Sindhu and Sovira. Vaisampayana continued, hearing these frightful words of the king of Sindhu, Krishna retired from that place, her face furrowed into a frown owing to the contraction of her eyebrows. But disregarding his words from supreme contempt, the splendor-wasted Krishna reproving said unto the king of Sindhu, Speak not thus again. Art thou not ashamed? Be on thy guard. And that lady of irreproachable character, anxiously expecting the return of her husband, began, with long speeches, to beguile him completely. Thus ends the 265th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 266, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, the daughter of Drupada, though naturally handsome, was suffused with crimson arising from a fit of anger. And with eyes inflamed and eyebrows bent in wrath, she reproved the ruler of the Suviras, saying, Art thou not ashamed, O fool, to use such insulting words in respect of those celebrated and terrible warriors, each like unto Indra himself, and who are all devoted to their duties and who never waver in fight with even hosts of Yakshas and Rakshasas? O Sovira, good men never speak ill of learned persons devoted to austerities and endued with learning, no matter whether they live in the wilderness or in houses. It is only wretches that are mean as thou who do so. Methinks there is none in this assemblage of Kshatriya, who is capable of holding thee by the hand to save thee from falling into the pit thou openest under thy feet. In hoping to vanquish King Yudhishthira the just, thou really hopest to separate, stick in hand, from a herd roaming in Himalayan valleys, its leader, huge as a mountain peak and with the temporal juice trickling down its rent temples. Out of childish folly thou art kicking up into wakefulness the powerful lion lying asleep, in order to pluck the hair from off his face. Thou shalt however have to run away when thou seest Bhimasena in wrath. Thy courting a combat with the furious Jishnu may be likened to thy kicking up a mighty, terrible, full-grown and furious lion asleep in a mountain cave. The encounter thou speakest of with those two excellent youths the younger Pandavas is like unto the act of a fool that wantonly trampleth on the tails of two venomous black cobras with bifurcated tongues. The bamboo, the reed, and the plantain bear fruit only to perish and not to grow in size any further. Like also the crab that conceiveth for her own destruction, thou wilt lay hands upon me. Who am protected by these mighty heroes. Jayadratha replied, I know all this, Krishna, and I am well aware of the prowess of those princes. But thou canst not frighten us now with these threats. We too, Krishna, belong by birth to the 17 high clans and are endowed with the 6 royal qualities. We therefore look down upon the Pandavas as inferior men. Therefore do thou, daughter of Draupada, ride this elephant or this chariot quickly, for thou canst not baffle us with thy words alone, or speaking less boastfully, seek thou the mercy of the king of the Soviras. Draupadi replied, though I am so powerful, why doth the king of Sovira yet consider me so powerless? Well known as I am, I cannot, from fear of violence, demean myself before that prince. Even Indra himself cannot abduct her for whose protection Krishna and Arjuna would together follow, riding in the same chariot. What shall I say therefore of a weak human being? When Kiriti, that slayer of foes, riding on his car will on my account, enter thy ranks, striking terror into every heart, he will consume everything around like fire consuming a stack of dry grass in summer. The warring princes of the Andaka and the Vrishni races, with Janardana at their head and the mighty bowmen of the Kaikeya tribe will all follow in my wake with great ardour. The terrible arrows of Dhananjaya, shot from the string of the Gandiva and propelled by his arms fly with great force through the air, roaring like the very clouds. And when thou wilt behold Arjuna shooting from the Gandiva a thick mass of mighty arrows like unto a flight of locusts, then wilt thou repent of thine own folly. Bethink thyself of what thou wilt feel when that warrior armed with the Gandiva, blowing his conch shell and with gloves reverberating with the strokes of his bowstring will again and again pierce thy breast with his shafts. And when Bhima will advance towards thee, mace in hand and the 2 sons of Madri range in all directions, vomiting forth the venom of their wrath, thou wilt then experience pangs of keen regret that will last forever. As I have never been false to my worthy lords even in thought, so by that merit shall I now have the pleasure of beholding thee vanquished and dragged by the sons of Pritha. Thou canst not, cruel as thou art, frighten me by seizing me with violence, for as soon as those Kuru warriors will espy me they will bring me back to the woods of Kamyaka. Vaisampayana continued, then that lady of large eyes, beholding them ready to lay violent hands on her, rebuked them and said, defile me not by your touch. And in a great alarm she then called upon her spiritual adviser, Domya. Jayadratha, however, seized her by her upper garment, but she pushed him with great vigor. And pushed by the lady, that sinful wretch fell upon the ground like a tree severed from its roots. Seized however, once more by him with great violence, she began to pant for breath. And dragged by the wretch, Krishna at last ascended his chariot having worshipped Domya's feet. And Domya then addressed Jayadratha and said, do thou, O Jayadratha, observe the ancient custom of the Kshatriyas. Thou canst not carry her off without having vanquished those great warriors. Without doubt, thou shalt reap the painful fruits of this thy despicable act, when thou encounterest the heroic sons of Pandu with Yudhishthira the just at their head. Vaisampayana continued, having said these words, Domya entering into the midst of Jayadratha's infantry, began to follow that renowned princess who was thus being carried away by the ravisher. Thus ends the 266th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 267, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, "Meanwhile those foremost of bowmen on the face of the earth, having wandered separately and ranged in all directions, and having slain plenty of deer and buffaloes, at length met together. And observing that great forest, which was crowded with hosts of deer and wild beasts, resounding with the shrill cries of birds, and hearing the shrieks and yells of the denizens of the wilderness, Yudhishthira said unto his brothers, These birds and wild beasts, flying towards that direction which is illuminated by the sun, are uttering dissonant cries and displaying an intense excitement. All this only shows that this mighty forest hath been invaded by hostile intruders. Without a moment's delay let us give up the chase. We have no more need of game. My heart aches and seems to burn. The soul in my body, overpowering the intellect, seems ready to fly out. As a lake rid by Garuda of the mighty snake that dwells in it, as a pot drained of its contents by thirsty men, as a kingdom reft of king and prosperity, even so doth the forest of Kamyaka seem to me." Thus addressed, those heroic warriors drove towards their abode, on great cars of handsome make and drawn by steeds of the Sandhava breed exceedingly fleet and possessed of the speed of the hurricane. And on their way back, they beheld a jackal yelling hideously on the wayside towards their left. And King Yudhishthira, regarding it attentively, said unto Bhima and Dhananjaya, "This jackal that belongs to a very inferior species of animals, speaking to our left, speaketh a language which plainly indicates that the sinful Kurus, disregarding us, have commenced to oppress us by resorting to violence." After the sons of Pandu had given up the chase and said these words, they entered the grove which contained their hermitage. And there they found their beloved one's maid, the girl Datrayaka, sobbing and weeping. And Indrasena then quickly alighting from the chariot and advancing with hasty steps towards her, questioned her, "O king, in great distress of mind, saying, What makes thee weep thus, lying on the ground, and why is thy face so woebegone and colourless? I hope no cruel wretches have done any harm to the Princess Draupadi, possessed of incomparable beauty and large eyes, and who is the second self of every one of those bulls of the Kuru race. So anxious hath been Dharma's son that if the princess hath entered the bowels of the earth, or hath soared to heaven or dived into the bottom of the ocean, he and his brothers will go thither in pursuit of her. Who could that fool be that would carry away that priceless jewel belonging to the mighty and ever victorious sons of Pandu, those grinders of force, and which is dear unto them as their own lives? I don't know who the person could be that would think of carrying away that princess who hath such powerful protectors and who is even like a walking embodiment of the hearts of the sons of Pandu, piercing whose breasts will terrible shafts stick to the ground today. Do not weep for her, timid girl, for know thou that Krishna will come back this very day, and the sons of Pritha, having slain their foes, will again be united with Yanyaseni." Thus addressed by him, Datrayaka, wiping her beautiful face, replied unto Indrasena the charioteer, saying, "Disregarding the 5 Indra-like sons of Pandu, Jayadratha hath carried away Krishna by force. The track pursued by him hath not yet disappeared, for the broken branches of trees have not yet faded. Therefore, turn your cars and follow her quickly, for the princess cannot have gone far by this time. Ye warriors possessed of the prowess of Indra, putting on your costly bows of handsome make, and taking up your costly bows and quivers, speed ye in pursuit of her, lest overpowered by threats or violence and losing her sense and the color of her cheeks, she yields herself up to an undeserving wight, even as one poureth forth, from the sacrificial ladle, the sanctified oblation on a heap of ashes. Oh, see that the clarified butter is not poured into an unigniting fire of paddy chaff, that a garland of flowers is not thrown away in a cemetery. Oh, take care that the soma juice of a sacrifice is not licked up by a dog through the carelessness of the officiating priests. Oh, let not the lily be rudely torn by a jackal roaming for its prey in the impenetrable forest. Oh, let no inferior wight touch with his lips the bright and beautiful face of your wife, fair as the beams of the moon and adorned with the finest nose and the handsomest eyes, like a dog licking clarified butter kept in the sacrificial pot. Do ye speed in this track and let not time steal a march on you. Yudhishthira said, Retire, good woman, and control thy tongue. Speak not this way before us. Kings or princes, whoever are infatuated with the possession of power, are sure to come to grief. Vaisampayana continued, with these words, they departed, following the track pointed out to them, and frequently breathing deep sighs like the hissing of snakes, and twanging the strings of their large bows. And then they observed a cloud of dust raised by the hoofs of the steeds belonging to Jayadratha's army. And they also saw Dhaumya in the midst of the ravishers' infantry, exhorting Bhima to quicken his steps. Then those princes, the sons of Pandu, with hearts undepressed, bade him be of good cheer and said unto him, Do thou return cheerfully. And then they rushed towards that host with great fury, like hawks swooping down on their prey. And possessed of the prowess of Indra, they had been filled with fury at the insult offered to Draupadi. But at sight of Jayadratha and of their beloved wife seated on his car, their fury knew no bounds. And those mighty bowmen, Bhima and Dhananjaya and the twin brothers and the king, called out Jayadratha to stop, upon which the enemy was so bewildered as to lose their knowledge of directions. Thus ends the 267th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 268, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, The hostile Kshatriyas, incensed at sight of Bhimasena and Arjuna, sent up a loud shout in the forest. And the wicked king Jayadratha, when he saw the standards of those bulls of the Kuru race, lost his heart, and addressing the resplendent Yanaseni seated on his car, said, Those 5 great warriors, O Krishna, that are coming, are I believe thy husbands. As thou knowest the sons of Pandu well, do thou, O lady of beautiful tresses, describe them one by one to us, pointing out which of them rideth which car. Thus addressed, Draupadi replied, Having done this violent deed calculated to shorten thy life, what will it avail thee now, fool, to know the names of those great warriors? For now that my heroic husbands are come, not one of ye will be left alive in battle. However, as thou art on the point of death and hast asked me, I will tell thee everything, this being consistent with the ordinance. Beholding King Yudhishthira the just with his younger brothers, I have not the slightest anxiety or fear from thee. That warrior at the top of whose flagstaff 2 handsome and sonorous tabors called Nanda and Upananda are constantly played upon, he, O Sovira chief, hath a correct knowledge of the morality of his own acts. Men that have attained success always walk in his train. With a complexion like that of pure gold, possessed of a prominent nose and large eyes, and endued with a slender make, that husband of mine is known among people by the name of Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma and the foremost of the Kuru race. That virtuous prince of men granteth life to even a foe that yields. Therefore, O fool, throwing down thy arms and joining thy hands, run to him for thy good to seek his protection. And that other man whom thou seest with long arms and tall as the full-grown sala tree, seated on his chariot biting his lips and contracting his forehead so as to bring the 2 eyebrows together, is he, my husband Vrikodara. Steeds of the noblest breed, plump and strong, well-trained and endued with great might, draw the cars of that warrior. His achievements are superhuman. He is known therefore by the name of Bhima on earth. They that offend him are never suffered to live. He never forgetteth a foe. On some pretext or other he wreaketh his vengeance. Nor is he pacified even after he has wreaked a signal vengeance. And there, that foremost of bowmen, endued with intelligence and renown, with senses under complete control and reverence for the old, that brother and disciple of Yudhishthira is my husband Dhananjaya. Virtue he never forsaketh, from lust or fear or anger. Nor doth he ever commit a deed that is cruel. Endued with the energy of fire and capable of withstanding every foe, that grinder of enemies is the son of Kunti. And that other youth, versed in every question of morality and profit, who ever dispelleth the fears of the affrighted, who is endued with high wisdom, who is considered as the handsomest person in the whole world and who is protected by all the sons of Pandu, being regarded by them as dearer to them than their own lives for his unflinching devotion to them, is my husband Nakula, possessed of great prowess. Endued with high wisdom and having Sahadeva for his second, possessed of exceeding lightness of hand, he fighteth with the sword, making dexterous passes therewith. Thou, foolish man, shalt witness today his performances on the field of battle, like unto those of Indra amid the ranks of Daityas. And that hero skilled in weapons and possessed of intelligence and wisdom and intent on doing what is agreeable to the son of Dharma, that favourite and youngest born of the Pandavas, is my husband Sahadeva. Heroic, intelligent, wise and ever wrathful, there is not another man equal unto him in intelligence or in eloquence amid assemblies of the wise. Dearer to Kunti than her own soul, he is always mindful of the duties of Kshatriyas, and would much sooner rush into fire or sacrifice his own life than say anything that is opposed to religion and morals. When the sons of Pandu will have killed thy warriors in battle, then wilt thou behold thy army in the miserable plight of a ship on the sea wrecked, with its freight of jewels on the back of a whale. Thus have I described unto thee the prowess of the sons of Pandu, disregarding whom in thy foolishness, thou hast acted so. If thou escapest unscathed from them, then, indeed thou wilt have obtained a new lease of life. Vasanpayana continued, then those 5 sons of Pritha, each like unto Indra, filled with wrath, leaving the panic-stricken infantry alone who were imploring them for mercy, rushed furiously upon the charioteers, attacking them on all sides and darkening the very air with the thick shower of arrows they shot. Thus ends the 268th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 269, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Vasampayana said, meanwhile the king of Sindhu was giving orders to those princes, saying, halt, strike, march, quick, and like. And on seeing Bhima, Arjuna, and the twin brothers with Yudhishthira, the soldiers sent up a loud shout on the field of battle. And the warriors of the Sivi, Sovira and Sindhu tribes, at the sight of those powerful heroes looking like fierce tigers, lost heart. And Bhimasena, armed with a mace entirely of Psyche iron and embossed with gold, rushed towards the Sandava monarch doomed to death. But Kotikakya, speedily surrounding Vrikodara with an array of mighty charioteers, interposed between and separated the combatants. And Bhima, though assailed with numberless spears and clubs and iron arrows hurled at him by the strong arms of hostile heroes, did not waver for one moment. On the other hand, he killed with his mace an elephant with its driver and 14 foot soldiers fighting in the front of Jayadratha's car. And Arjuna, also desirous of capturing the Sovira king, slew 500 brave mountaineers fighting in the van of the Sindhu army. And in that encounter, the king himself slew in the twinkling of an eye 100 of the best warriors of the Soviras. And Nakula too, sword in hand, jumping out of his chariot, scattered in a moment, like a tiller sowing seeds, the heads of the combatants fighting in the rear. And Sahadeva from his chariot began to fell with his iron shafts, many warriors fighting on elephants, like birds dropped from the boughs of a tree. Then the king of Trigatas, bow in hand descending from his great chariot, killed the 4 steeds of the king with his mace. But Kunti's son, King Yudhishthira the Just, seeing the foe approach so near and fighting on foot, pierced his breast with a crescent-shaped arrow. And that hero thus wounded in the breast began to vomit blood, and fell down upon the ground beside Pritha's son, like an uprooted tree. And King Yudhishthira the Just, whose steeds had been slain, taking this opportunity, descended with Indrasena from his chariot and mounted that of Sahadeva. And the 2 warriors, Kshemenkara and Mahamuksha, singling out Nakula, began to pour on him from both sides a perfect shower of keen-edged arrows. The son of Madri, however, succeeded in slaying with a couple of long shafts both those warriors who had been pouring on him an arrowy shower like clouds in the rainy season. Suratha, the king of Trigatas, well versed in elephant charges, approaching the front of Nakula's chariot, caused it to be dragged by the elephant he rode. But Nakula, little daunted at this, leaped out of his chariot, and securing a point of vantage, stood shield and sword in hand, immovable as a hill. Thereupon Suratha, wishing to slay Nakula at once, urged towards him his huge and infuriated elephant with trunk upraised. But when the beast came near, Nakula with his sword severed from his head both trunk and tusks. And that mail-clad elephant, uttering a frightful roar, fell headlong upon the ground, crushing its riders by the fall. And having achieved this daring feat, heroic son of Madri, getting upon Bhimasina's car, obtained a little rest. And Bhima too, seeing Prince Kotikakya rush to the encounter, cut off the head of his charioteer with a horseshoe arrow. That prince did not even perceive that his driver was killed by his strong-armed adversary, and his horses, no longer restrained by a driver, ran about on the battlefield in all directions. And seeing that prince without a driver turn his back, that foremost of smiters, Bhima the son of Pandu, went up to him and slew him with a bearded dart. And Dhananjaya also cut off with his sharp crescent-shaped arrows, the heads as well as the boss of all the 12 Sovira heroes. And the great warrior killed in battle with the arrow, the leaders of the Ikshvakus and the hosts of Civis and Trigatas and Sendavas. And a great many elephants with their colors and chariots with standards were seen to fall by the hand of Arjuna. And heads without trunks and trunks without heads, lay covering the entire field of battle. And dogs and herons, and ravens and crows, and falcons and jackals, and vultures feasted on the flesh and blood of warriors slain on that field. And when Jayadratha the king of Sindhu, saw that his warriors were slain, he became terrified and anxious to run away, leaving Krishna behind. And in that general confusion the wretch, setting down Draupadi there, fled for his life, pursuing the same forest path by which he had come. And King Yudhishthira the Just, seeing Draupadi with Daumya walking before, caused her to be taken up on a chariot by the heroic Sahadeva, the son of Madri. And when Jayadratha had fled away, Bhima began to mow down with his iron arrows such of his followers as were running away, striking each trooper down after naming him. But Arjuna, perceiving that Jayadratha had run away, exhorted his brother to refrain from slaughtering the remnant of the Sendava host. And Arjuna said, I do not find on the field of battle Jayadratha, through whose fault alone we have experienced this bitter misfortune. Seek him out first, and may success crown thy effort. What is the good of thy slaughtering these troopers? Why art thou bent upon this unprofitable business? Vaisampayana continued, Bhimasena, thus exhorted by Arjuna of great wisdom, turning to Yudhishthira replied, saying, As a great many of the enemy's warriors have been slain and as they are flying in all directions, do thou, O king, now return home, taking with thee Draupadi and the twin brothers and high-souled Daumya, and console the princess after getting back to our asylum. That foolish king of Sindhu I shall not let alone as long as he lives, even if he find a shelter in the internal regions or is backed by Indra himself? And Yudhishthira replied, saying, O thou of mighty arms, remembering our sister Dusala and the celebrated Gandhari, thou shouldst not slay the king of Sindhu even though he is so wicked. Vaisampayana continued. Hearing these words, Draupadi was greatly excited. And that highly intelligent lady in her excitement said to her husbands, Bhima and Arjuna, with indignation mixed with modesty, if you care to do what is agreeable to me, you must slay that mean and despicable wretch, that sinful, foolish, infamous and contemptible chief of the Saindava clan. That foe who forcibly carries away a wife, and he that wrests a kingdom, should never be forgiven on the battlefield, even though he should supplicate for mercy. Thus admonished, those two valiant warriors went in search of the Saindava chief. And the king, taking Krishna with him, returned home, accompanied by his spiritual advisor. And on entering the hermitage, he found it was laid over with seats for the ascetics and crowded with their disciples and graced with the presence of Markandeya and other Brahmanas. And while those Brahmanas were gravely bewailing the lot of Draupadi, Yudhishthira, endued with great wisdom, joined their company with his brothers. And beholding the king thus come back after having defeated the Saindava and the Sovira host and recovered Draupadi, they were all elated with joy. And the king took his seat in their midst. And the excellent Princess Krishna entered the hermitage with the two brothers. Meanwhile Bhima and Arjuna, learning the enemy was full 2 miles ahead of them, urged their horses to greater speed in pursuit of him. And the mighty Arjuna performed a wonderful deed, killing the horse of Jayadratha although they were full 2 miles ahead of them. Armed with celestial weapons, undaunted by difficulties, he achieved this difficult feat with arrows inspired with mantras. And then the two warriors, Bhima and Arjuna, rushed towards the terrified king of Sindhu, whose horses had been slain and who was alone and perplexed in mind. And the latter was greatly grieved on seeing his steeds slain. And beholding Dhananjaya do such a daring deed, and intent on running away, he followed the same forest track by which he had come. And Falguna, seeing the Saindava chief so active in his fright, overtook him and addressed him, saying, Possessed of so little manliness, how couldst thou dare to take away a lady by force? Turn round, O prince. It is not meet that thou shouldst run away. How canst thou act so? Leave thy followers in the midst of thy force. Although addressed by the sons of Pritha thus, the monarch of Sindhu did not even once turn round. And then bidding him do what he chose, the mighty Bhima overtook him in an instant, but the kind Arjuna entreated him not to kill that wretch. Thus ends the 269th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 270, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, Jayadratha, flying for his life upon beholding those two brothers with upraised arms, was sorely grieved and bolted off with speed and coolness. But the mighty and indignant Bhimasena, descending from his chariot, ran after him, thus fleeing, and seized him by the hair of his head. And holding him high up in the air, Bhima thrust him on the ground with violence. And seizing the prince by the head, he knocked him about. And when the wretch recovered consciousness, he groaned aloud and wanted to get up on his legs. But that hero, endued with mighty arms, kicked him on the head. And Bhima pressed him on the breast with his knees as well as with his fists. And the prince, thus belabored, soon became insensible. Then Falguna dissuaded the wrathful Bhimasena from inflicting further chastisement on the prince, by reminding him of what Yudhishthira had said regarding their sister Dusala. But Bhima replied, saying, This sinful wretch hath done a cruel injury to Krishna, who never can bear such treatment. He, therefore, deserveth to die at hands. But what can I do? The king is always overflowing with mercy, and thou too art constantly putting obstacles in my way from a childish sense of virtue." Having said these words, Vrikodara, with his crescent-shaped arrow, shaved the hair of the prince's head, heaving 5 tufts in as many places. Jayadratha uttered not a word at this. Then Vrikodara, addressing the foe, said, "If thou wishest to live, listen to me, O fool. I shall tell thee the means to attain that wish. In public assemblies and in open courts thou must say, 'I am the slave of the Pandavas. On this condition alone, I will pardon thee thy life.' This is the customary rule of conquest on the field of battle." Thus addressed and treated, King Jayadratha said to the mighty and fierce warrior who always looked awful, "Be it so." And he was trembling and senseless and begrimed with dust. Then Arjuna and Vrikodara, securing him with chains, thrust him into a chariot. And Bhima, himself mounting that chariot and accompanied by Arjuna, drove towards the hermitage. And approaching Yudhishthira seated there, he placed Jayadratha in that condition before the king. And the king, smiling, told him to set the Sindhu prince at liberty. Then Bhima said unto the king, "Do thou tell Draupadi that this wretch hath become the slave of the Pandavas." Then his oldest brother said unto him affectionately, "If thou hast any regard for us, do thou set this wretch at liberty." And Draupadi too, reading the king's mind, said, "Let him off. He hath become a slave of the king's, and thou too hast disfigured him by leaving 5 tufts of hair on his head." Then that crestfallen prince, having obtained his liberty, approached King Yudhishthira and bowed down unto him. And seeing those munis there, he saluted them also. Then the kind-hearted King Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma, beholding Jayadratha in that condition, almost supported by Arjuna, said unto him, "Thou art a free man now, I emancipate thee. Now go away and be careful not to do such thing again, shame to thee. Thou hadst intended to take away a lady by violence, even though thou art so mean and powerless. What other wretch save thee would think of acting thus?" Then that foremost king of Bharata's race eyed with pity that perpetrator of wicked deeds, and believing that he had lost his senses, said, "Mayst thy heart grow in virtue. Never set thy heart again on immoral deeds. Thou mayst depart in peace now with thy charioteers, cavalry and infantry." Thus addressed by Yudhishthira, the prince Bharata was overpowered with shame, and bending down his head, he silently and sorrowfully wended his way to the place where the Ganga debouches on the plains. And imploring the protection of the god of 3 eyes, the consort of Uma, he did severe penance at that place. And the 3-eyed god, pleased with his austerities, deigned to accept his offerings in person, and he also granted him a boon. Do thou listen, O monarch, how the prince received that boon. Jayadratha, addressing that god, asked the boon, "May I be able to defeat in battle all the 5 sons of Pandu on their chariots?" The god, however, told him, "This cannot be." And Maheswara said, "None can slay or conquer them in battle. Save Arjuna, however, thou shalt be able to only check them once on the field of battle." The heroic Arjuna with mighty arms is the god incarnate styled Nara. He practiced austerities of old in the Verdal forest. The god Narayana is his friend. Therefore he is unconquerable of the very gods. I myself have given him the celestial weapon called Pasupata. From the regents also of all the 10 cardinal points, he has acquired the thunderbolt and other mighty weapons. And the great god Vishnu, who is the infinite spirit, the Lord preceptor of all the gods, is the supreme being without attributes, and the soul of the universe, and existeth pervading the whole creation. At the termination of a cycle of ages, assuming the shape of the all-consuming fire, he consumed the whole universe with mountains and seas and islands and hills and woods and forests. And after the destruction of the Naga world also in the subterranean regions in the same way, vast masses of many-colored and loud-pealing clouds, with streaks of lightning spreading along the entire welkin, had appeared on high. Then pouring down water in torrents thick as axles of cars, and filling the space everywhere, these extinguishing that all-consuming fire. When at the close of 4,000 yugas the earth thus became flooded with water, like one vast sea, and all mobile creatures were hushed in death, and the sun and the moon and the winds were all destroyed, and the universe was devoid of planets and stars, the Supreme Being called Narayana, unknowable by the senses, adorned with 1,000 heads and as many eyes and legs, became desirous of rest. And the serpent Sesha, looking terrible with his 1,000 hoods and shining with the splendor of 10,000 suns and white as the kunda flower or the moon or a string of pearls, or the white lotus or milk, or the fibers of a lotus stalk, served for his conch. And that adorable and omnipotent god thus slept on the bosom of the deep, enveloping all space with nocturnal gloom. And when his creative faculty was excited, he awoke and found the universe denuded of everything. In this connection, the following sloka is recited respecting the mean of Narayana. Water was created by the Rishi, Nara, and it formed his corpus, therefore do we hear it styled as Nara. And because it formed his ayana, resting place, therefore is he known as Narayana. As soon as that everlasting being was engaged in meditation for the recreation of the universe, a lotus flower instantaneously came into existence from his navel, and the four-faced Brahma came out of that navel lotus. And then the grandsire of all creatures, seating himself on that flower and finding that the whole universe was a blank, created in his own likeness, and from his will the 9 great rishis, Marichi and others. And these in their turn observing the same thing, completed the creation, by creating yakshas, rakshas, pisachas, reptiles, men, and all mobile and immobile creatures. The Supreme Spirit hath 3 conditions. In the form of Brahma, he is the creator, and in the form of Vishnu he is the preserver, and in his form as Rudra, he is the destroyer of the universe. King of Sindhu, hast thou not heard of the wonderful achievements of Vishnu, described to thee by the Munis and the Brahmanas learned in the Veds? When the world was thus reduced to one vast sea of water, with only the heavens above, the Lord, like a firefly at night time during the rainy season, moved about hither and thither in search of stable ground, with the view of rehabilitating his creation, and became desirous of raising the earth submerged in water. What shape shall I take to rescue the earth from this flood? So thinking and contemplating with divine insight, he bethought himself of the shape of a wild boar fond of sporting in water. And assuming the shape of a sacrificial boar, shining with effulgence and instinct, with the Veds and 10 yojanas in length, with pointed tusks and a complexion like dark clouds, and with a body huge as a mountain, and roaring like a conglomeration of clouds, the Lord plunged into the waters and lifted up the earth with one of his tusks, and replaced it in its proper sphere. At another time, the mighty Lord, assuming a wonderful form with a body half lion, half man, and squeezing his hands, repaired to the court of the ruler of the Daityas. That progenitor of the Daityas, the son of Diti, who was the enemy of the gods, beholding the Lord's peculiar form, burst out into passion and his eyes became inflamed with rage. And Hiranyakasipu, the warlike son of Diti and the enemy of the gods, adorned with garlands and looking like a mass of dark clouds, taking up his trident in hand and roaring like the clouds, rushed on that being half lion, half man. Then that powerful king of wild beasts, half man, half lion, taking a leap in the air, instantly rent the Daitya in twain by means of his sharp claws. And the adorable lotus-eyed lord of great effulgence, having thus slain the Daitya king for the well-being of all creatures, again took his birth in the womb of Aditi as son of Kasyapa. And at the expiration of 1,000 years she was delivered of that superhuman conception. And then was born that being, of the hue of rain-charged clouds with bright eyes and of dwarfish stature. He had the ascetic's staff and water pot in hand, and was marked with the emblem of a curl of hair on the breast. And that adorable being wore matted locks and the sacrificial thread, and he was stout and handsome and resplendent with luster. And that being, arriving at the sacrificial enclosure of Vali, king of the Danavas, entered the sacrificial assembly with the aid of Brihaspati. And beholding that dwarf-bodied being, Vali was well pleased and said unto him, I am glad to see thee, O Brahmana. Say, what is it that thou wantest from me? Thus addressed by Vali, the dwarf god replied with a smile, saying, So be it. Do thou, Lord of the Danavas, give me 3 paces of ground. And Vali contented to give what that Brahmana of infinite power had asked. And while measuring with his paces the space he sought, Hari assumed a wonderful and extraordinary form. And with only 3 paces he instantly covered this illimitable world. And then that everlasting God, Vishnu, gave it away unto Indra. This history which has just been related to thee, is celebrated as the incarnation of the dwarf. And from him, all the gods had their being, and after him the world is said to be Vaishnava on being pervaded by Vishnu. And for the destruction of the wicked and the preservation of religion, even he hath taken his birth among men in the race of the Yadas. And the adorable Vishnu is styled Krishna. These, O King of Sindhu, are the achievements of the Lord whom all the worlds worship and whom the learned describe as without beginning and without end, unborn and divine. They call him the unconquerable Krishna with conch shell, discus and mace, and adorned with the emblem of a curl of hair, divine, clad in silken robes of yellow hue, and the best of those versed in the art of war. Arjuna is protected by Krishna, the possessor of these attributes. That glorious and lotus-eyed being of infinite power, that slayer of hostile heroes, riding in the same chariot with Pritha's son, protected him. He is therefore invincible, the very gods cannot resist his power, still less can one with human attributes vanquish the son of Pritha in battle. Therefore, King, thou must let him alone. Thou shalt however be able to vanquish for a single day only, the rest of Yudhishthira's forces along with thine enemies the 4 sons of Pandu. Vaisampayana continued, having said these words unto that prince, the adorable Hara of 3 eyes, the destroyer of all sins, the consort of Uma, and lord of wild beasts, the destroyer of Daksha's sacrifice, the slayer of Tripura, and he that had plucked out the eyes of Bhaga, surrounded by his dwarfish and hunchbacked and terrible followers, having frightful eyes and ears and uplifted arms, vanished, O tiger among kings, from that place with his consort Urna. And the wicked Jayadratha also returned home, and the sons of Pandu continued to dwell in the forest of Kamyaka. Thus ends the 270th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe to be notified of when new audiobooks are uploaded. Thank you for listening and learning. Shanti.